Boom. All right. I think we're in. Yeah. All right. Okay. So welcome back to the Soul Ghost Hunters radio show. This is our 13th, 14th, I don't know, somewhere in the teens episode with Liara Covert from Australia. Uh, for those of you who haven't been tuning in, the whole thing revolves around the ghost in our journeys, and she's writing a book that's correlating that in her own experience, and then also connecting it to the collective, and that's what this show's been about. And well, really, a huge part of it has been about movies and stories. So I'll hand it over to you, and let's see what you got for us today.
Thanks, Todd. Welcome, everyone, listeners and viewers. It's always a joy to see you every week and to hear your feedback and your suggestions. As usual, we like to start our program with a story to set the stage for the themes that we'll cover today. And we have a Zen story about a monk who is having a hard time escaping a few things. So he starts in a monastery and he attempts to meditate, but he's bothered by noises, birds, distractions. So he leaves the monastery and he goes down into the garden. Similarly, he's bothered by animals that just sort of run through. So he decides he's going to go down to the water, the nearby river, and he gets in a boat. And he says finally to himself, I'm going to get some peace and quiet. So he rows his boat out to the center of the river and he takes the oars in and he closes his eyes and he does his best to meditate. But before too long, there's another boat that collides with his boat. And at this stage, he loses control entirely. He's just had it. And he starts mouthing off at whoever the captain of this other boat must be. He's had it up to his eyeballs in distractions. And what he discovers when he opens his eyes is that there is no captain of the other boat. It just happened to float out into the river and hit his boat. And when he realizes that he is angry at nothing, all of a sudden he has an aha moment. And he realizes that in order to be able to focus, he really has to accept himself and ground within himself and stop focusing on the external. Have you heard that story before, Todd, or anything similar?
No, I haven't heard it before, but I mean, it sounds very familiar in the sense of what I've experienced and witnessed, which is basically, he jumped into the river to be by himself and to reach that point, but realizing the impact of his perception, his projections, even of thought, almost like worry. You know, if you worry, then you're going to attract that which you worry about, and that whole game starts where you externalize it and say, oh, it's still that, it's still that. Well, that's what he demonstrated because he left the external influences that he was used to, went into the boat, went down the river, only to find himself in a way he didn't think he would.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There is this idea that no matter where we go, there we are. And when we think we can run from whatever's bothering us, it turns out that whatever the source of what's bothering us is in ourselves. So that's sort of what he discovers. And it's very relevant to the theme today because when we look at ghosts, those things that we don't want to look at generally, that keep showing up for us, we're often drawn to this whole idea of expansion of consciousness because in order to evolve or involve into more of who we are, we have to face these things and we have to um, allow ourselves to discover what else is here. And our listeners, as always, have given us a few suggestions of films to look at this week. The first one is a movie called Valerian and The City of a Thousand Planets. Are you familiar with that one, Todd?
No, no, not at all.
Okay, this was a film from 2017. The director is Luc Besson, the same director of Lucy, which we've explored before. It's quite an intriguing film, and it's sort of set in a sci-fi scenario. There is a civilization, another planet, called pearls, or I guess the civilization, their source of energy is pearls, and the name of the species are pearls as well. So they're a unique species, but they are portrayed as very altruistic, compassionate, forgiving, very idealistic in nature. And um, it sort of reminds me a little bit of a version of Avatar because we have the militaristic sort of humans who come and destroy things, and the pearls have the surviving pearls have the opportunity for revenge, but they don't choose revenge. They choose forgiveness. And um, the way they function as beings is very interesting because there is this spiritual side of things. When they pass, their soul searches through the universe to find a body to inhabit temporarily before it finds its final rest. And there is a princess who decides to find a human body to inhabit. And she is visible, her soul is visible in his body, and her family can communicate with her through him as well, in a kind of in-between state. And he is sort of torn between worlds, similar to Jake in Avatar, being confronted with the militaristic side of things, the patriarchal energy that wants to invade, take over, um, or the altruistic side of the Pearl civilization. And so he's confronted with moralistic questions, and in essence, he has to decide which side he's on, much like Jake in Avatar, which many people are familiar with. And it sort of invites reflection on universal principles and the kind of reality we really want to live in. And we talk about expansion of consciousness and the kind of world that we as a humanity want to evolve into or create. It tends to be grounded in the kinds of things that the pearls represent in this movie. Does any of that resonate with you, or do you have any comments on what I'm sharing?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the guy that did Lucy then goes on to do this, kind of like the lady that did the Terminator, then went on to the Matrix. Well,
Yes.
because there's a lot of things in there, you know. One of them, the first one that stands out to me, is how the soul, in essence, goes into this other body, and the family can see the soul within the body. So it kind of speaks to the transition that we're commencing upon now, and what's going to come from the trajectory that we've been on, and what that means now that we've entered this real space of a multidimensionality in our physical experience. So I think that's very interesting because I think it speaks to how we are going to kind of solidify this grid or this new dimensional timeline by recognizing that within each other, you know, just like they could see her in him or him in her. Either way, it's basically the same thing. So I see that. And then the other thing I see, just like in um, the previous, like with Lucy, even though it wasn't your typical governmental coming at her, and the governmental was the good guy, was the good cop, and the gangsters were the bad cop, you know, which was kind of funny if you think about it. It makes you wonder if the CIA produced that. but but my point is, it doesn't matter whether it was one side of the adversarial face or the other, because both are a catalyst. They're chasing that, which is erupting, which is igniting, which is expanding, which is basically what we're all doing. So I think that element of it too, where you have this force that's both an antagonist but a catalyst, and really, because of that interaction, is um, contributing to this space, you know, where there's new potentials. And so that's really where I see Lucy, and where I see, even though I haven't seen this movie, where I can see the value or the direction of the movie is it never stops. Nothing ever overcomes the hero or the heroine, right?
Mm,
Nothing ever stops uh, the inertia of the universal energy. it's always moving. It never stops. So yeah, that sounds pretty cool.
I love
I don't watch movies anymore, but I would have to watch that one. I said I'm going to watch all these movies since we started this, and I haven't watched one. I've realized finally I'm not going to watch any movies. But yeah, that's cool. I'd rather talk about it.
Well, it's funny how you sort of move through time and space and you interact with the themes that are raised. And that's one way of experiencing the vibration or the frequency of the movies, isn't it? I love the points that you bring up, the idea that the the different forces, especially sort of the intense force, can seem like a catalyst for the expansion of consciousness because it's one thing to have a civilization present, like the pearls in this movie, to demonstrate certain kinds of behavior that might seem idealistic, but that doesn't mean everyone's necessarily going to adopt that way of doing things. So when there's interaction, the antagonistic side of things gets the energy moving and seems to draw people in and to engage in a different way and to contemplate, well, how this could actually happen in practice, why it hasn't happened in practice. And the movement of that energy is part of what brings new realities into being. It's not just an idea, that's a spark, that's the beginning, but the interactions are what accelerate or facilitate the change. And I find it's quite stimulating to consider these possibilities because if possibilities are presented, they exist somewhere. We, with string theory, we know that there are infinite realities out there, and we get to choose which parallel dimensions or realms we're going to jump into. Because we talk about timeline jumping, we talk about telekinesis, we talk about telepathy, and all these skills that we have, some of which are more dormant than others. But when we see these things activated in storylines, what we're doing is we're participating in that on some level already. And we get to decide how much of our focus and attention and energy are going to be put into this kind of a reality and how and what is going to unfold next.
That was a mouthful. That was nice. Yeah, good stream. And yeah,
Yeah.
and I go back to the to what I was saying earlier. Because of what you're saying. Excuse me. Um, so in the second movie, since I haven't seen it, that's what made me think of it while you were talking about this. But I'll go back to Lucy because I've seen it. So imagine you're Neo, who's now morphed into Lucy, just
Mm,
like Terminator moved. Okay, so now Lucy is us. The pearls are us,
hmm
each one of us. Okay. All right. And in Neo, there was a clear cut matrix, opposition, antagonist. All right. That continued to light his fire, and it was part of his journey. It wouldn't have just been done if he went to see the oracle and the oracle told him every great truth or Morpheus, and nothing happens. No, you got to have that friction. So
that's right.
now you go to Lucy, and in Lucy you could say, with her awareness, which is us, you see everything outside of you for what it is. Okay. Now, you have a government uh, represented by, say, Morgan Freeman. Okay. All right. And you have these gangsters, these Chinese gangsters, and all that stuff. You're really looking at the same thing.
Mm.
It's still outside of you. Okay. And so I have a feeling that this movie you're talking about, what's it called?
Valerian and the
Valerian.
Thousand Planet or City
Right.
of Thousand Planet.
Yeah. So it's more like a collective coming to a point where they're seeing the same thing. Okay. Take an example at a human level right now in the United States of America. Let's just take that. You've got Republicans and you've got Democrats. You got Trump and you got the other side. And if you've watched any of this, which would be hard not to over the last, say, 8 years or whatever, through Trump's first term and then Biden, this is not a political comment. This is an energetic translation of exactly what we're talking about. And I've seen people flip and flop and flip and flop and flip and flop. And it's going to continue to happen until they realize, oh, that's all the same thing. See,
Yeah.
right? So there's an irony in Lucy, And then this other one, Valerian, it's a more collective field. And the fact that they don't strike back at the end, I think is meaningful. Even though I haven't seen the movie, that seemed to be, you know, the type of energy that we're carrying, that no matter what that external presents to us, we're going to put ourselves out there in our best possible way with no expectation at all and no validation needed. It's a powerful, powerful um, I am soul type of, proclamation or expression. So yeah, great movie. I haven't seen it.
But it does spark discussion, doesn't it? There's this part of Valerian where, this human male discovers, he has this pearl spirit soul abiding within him. And it sort of draws attention to, the spirit guide or the soul guide idea of a conscience and, what is the best or the right thing to do for the collective. And at the same time, he's sort of in a militaristic environment, much like Jake in Avatar. And Jake, of course, had an original mission that changed dramatically when he decided to shift allegiance, if you will, to the spiritual or more balanced civilization of the Na'vi. It didn't mean there wasn't conflict there that he had to manage, but it was just a different way of seeing and experiencing his body, his spirit, his life in general. And in Valerian, Valerian has to come to terms with making certain choices as well and decide, which side he's really on. Is he going to help the pearls and what they represent within him, his soul? It's not really external anything. Externally, he's got the militaristic side of things and he has his knowledge of this alien or extraterrestrial civilization. But he has to decide within himself, is he going to choose love and justice over duty and covering up tragedies or militaristic endeavors? And it's very much love versus fear at work again. So we have similar themes that come out in The Matrix as well. And of course, Lucy, are we going to be heartfelt, heart and soul guided? Or are we going to be driven by ego and other forces that also have the power to guide or control us if we allow it?
Yeah. And the other thing, yes, you're right on point. Let's keep going. The other thing, as you're telling me this, which I didn't realize until you started this last commentary, um, so that was a walk-in. In Valerian, that was an aspect that by some level or another, and we can't perfectly define it, and anyone that says they can is full of shit. But the bottom line is there's a connection there. And it could be
Mhm.
a twin flame connection by our standards and definitions. It could be a lot of things. The whole point is something came into him. He had a wider state of awareness. He would not,
Mhm.
something didn't take over him.
No.
He still had to make that choice, right? And go with the magic and go with the ethereal, whatever. So that's another thing I see here too, because yeah, when you were saying that, I was thinking, man, I'd love to get that dude on the show and like pick his brain because even though, and we've all dealt with this because we're all in the same infrastructure or came from the same infrastructure of this narcissistic paradigm that is built on codependence, toxicity, blah, 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 etc. Right? But yet we were still able to shine. So even though you're in Hollywood, if I was talking to this dude, you're in Hollywood, you're trying to direct a movie, you're trying to send a message, da 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 da, and you have certain constraints, you can still make it come through. And that's what I see in the coding of this movie I haven't even seen. So that
Mm.
was really, to me, like something a lot of people could relate to. I know I can, um, where you have a wider aspect of yourself come in and the whole world changes and your relationship changes. And whether the world is breaking down or like a tornado, like in, Wizard of Oz with Dorothy, you're centered more and more and more because there's one thing that's continued to come through in this incarnation. And as the memories come back, all the other incarnations, be it on this planet or not. Yeah. Great pick. Whoever sent you that note, please send them my love.
They're feeling it, Todd. They are. One of the secondary themes of that movie also is the idea of sort of the dangers of unchecked militaristic or power in the hands of authorities and military secrets, these kinds of things that, of course, are coming to the surface in our understanding of consciousness in modern day as well. So what's interesting is this movie came out almost what it was 2017, so almost 10 years ago. And yet the themes that are in that film are very relevant in present day. So when we look at parallel timelines and the whole idea of time, time and space, um, when things come out, we see them in a certain way, but we can revisit this movie like others with our current level of consciousness and see that there are embedded messages and pieces of information or data that we can see very differently now based on how we understand our own existence. And this, of course, contrasts the peaceful spiritual existence of the pearls in the movie, and in general, just a more connected or interconnected existence. And that's what humanity as a collective is evolving into in many respects. So this scenario that was presented in the movie was again a stepping stone to what we choose, which direction we choose to go. Much like Avatar and some of these other movies that we've talked about, we have choices. And whichever choices we make, that doesn't mean there aren't any challenges, but are we going to be making more soul-guided and heartfelt choices? Or are we going to be making other choices? And whichever choices we make, they have consequences. And as we reflect on the history of civilizations in this planet and on other planets, then we know that we can allow history to repeat itself, or we can create a new timeline. And that's really significant.
Yeah. So imagine when we talk about the militaristic aspect that was in Avatar or Neo, right? Or that was soft shoed in Lucy. um, what is that we're looking at? Part of this journey, a huge part of it, the last part of it. That's why there's such a burn. And I think we're in that corridor right now. That's why I said to you what I said before we came online. Um, yeah, you know, I am who I think I am. You are who you think you are. We are who we think we are. Now that you have this power that's about to be granted to you, that you have the full awareness of what that is, you will be, you will be introduced to what you could do with it if you hoarded even that much of the esoteric knowledge.
Mm.
So we started the show, and you said something, and I use the analogy of worry. Okay, so if I worry, I'm going to bring something towards me. If I didn't worry, it's not even in the field. Now,
That's
this is
right.
the basis of the militaristic kind of thing, and we all have it in us. Every one of us has it within us, and it may be described or not be described as well as saying military, okay? But it's definitely a place where you go and you got to protect yourself. You got to put up fences, you got to put locks on the door, you got to get weapons, and so on and so on. So, my point is, this is a part of us. It's a part of us that's very, very, very important. Okay. I had 2 or 3 nights of lucid dreams in the past week, and there's a relevance to this because, and I told this story twice on the shows, but I was in a room with a bunch of, with a 6 or 7 soul family. And it was a building or a house or whatever where there was several other rooms, and in the other rooms were reptilians. So I know I'm in a dream, I'm lucid, and I'm like, okay, I got this. I'm multidimensional. You know, we're all like, what are we going to do? How do we get out of here? And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to instantly manifest a weapon. And I put it in my hand, open the door, and as I'm going out the door, I hear, you know, if you take this weapon out there, then those things which would be in correspondence with it will present themselves. So I got rid of the weapon and we walked out untouched, unscathed. So my point is there is a reason that we're seeing the distortion. It's not about bad guys, it's not about someone out to get something on us. It's about the crossroads of being handed infinite wisdom, omniscience, the ability to create new universes, literally, and all things that come from that. And the only way to get there is to put yourself out there, right? You don't just walk in and they give you a robe and say, okay, everything's fine and dandy now. The first thing the shamanic structure does to you is it throws you a curveball to test your integrity and your intention and your love. So profound, profound. Um, and so I just think to me, that's the first element that I take in, and I see it as I haven't seen it before. So yes, thank you for these movies and this collaboration. But that's the reality. And again, I go back and watching it in amazement in the light worker and starseed circles, the whole Trump, the Republican, I'm like, what? What? Like, come on. It's all the same thing. And they're all just like us. And they're all doing the best they can. And their whole world and they're all being hit by all the energies and all that stuff. So, very good for me, very eye opening conversation. So, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm enjoying it immensely also. And I love how this is a stepping stone, not only to the next movie we're going to cover, but also to what is unfolding through me beside this particular radio show that I'm enjoying so much. As new information is flowing through me, and as you point out, we all have opportunities to be tested. And, if we are going to be given certain kinds of information, or if we're going to allow ourselves to remember, what are we going to do with that? And I've been starting to create animated children's stories as a way to reincorporate memories or travels, interdimensional travels through Lemuria, Mu, Atlantis, Tartaria, other civilizations that are part of Earth's true history that are coming back into collective conscious awareness, and not using the information that is coming through in a way to harm or instill fear, but rather to evoke deeper remembering and childlike innocence and reinstilling of the original core values and universal principles that have been fundamental to some of these civilizations. And when we talk about the movies that we're exploring in this show, there are threads of universal principles. There are threads of the soul-guided existence that we have the choice to move into. And each of us has choices about how to live our lives where we are and what we're going to do with the information or the energies that are flowing through us. And the next movie that was suggested, I just chuckle about because it's called Wall-E. Do you remember Wall-E?
How do you spell that? I,
Wall and then a hyphen E. It's a movie about a robot, an android.
no, I never heard of it ever.
Okay, well, this is very funny because, again, everything is synchronistic, but it's sort of a spiritual retelling of Genesis in a way. And it's set in a futuristic scenario where Earth has essentially destroyed itself. And there is a group of humans who have left the planet and they are floating around in, a spaceship. And there's this robot, Wall-E, that is sort of supposed to be the last robot sort of here. And it's following his experience. And he's sort of portrayed on some level as Adam, from the Bible stories. And there's another robot that comes to Earth to test things out. And would you happen to guess her name is Eve?
Oh, I thought it was Lilith.
Yeah, well, she probably could have had that name too, but the funny thing is some things are maybe too much in plain sight. This is only one way of looking at the movie, but essentially, the Wally finds a plant that's growing, and when Eve sort of gets this information, she sends it back to the humans that are floating through space in this spaceship, and um, the idea is they were going to return to Earth if it was habitable again. And so it's the opportunity for a new Eden, to emerge, a new level of consciousness, a new way of existing on the planet. But it is supposedly emerging through the insight gained through robots and AI, so it's got some very interesting implications in it. But uh, the idea of looking at it as the prospect of rebirth, and a new level of consciousness, a new way of existing on Earth is valuable. And of course, there are many um, humorous and confusing portrayals of human beings in this movie. People that are overtly materialistic, people that are greedy, people that look at the seven sins and put them into practice, kind of thing. Um, but it's sort of can be regarded as a, a way of seeing humanity's redemption, if you want to look at it that way. But you don't have to look at it from a biblical perspective per se. You can look at it just in general of the possibility or the opportunity for living in a completely different way. And every moment we have that opportunity, we can return from our own exile from ourselves. If we're looking at Christ consciousness as being completely non-denominational, Christ consciousness, let's use a different word, then the idea of activating 12-stranded DNA, for example, or a completely different way of existing, biocircuitry, whatever your understanding of optimum functioning is, how would that change how we operate with each other? Um, how would that change our perception? How would that activate dormant abilities, for example? So the movie itself is really a stepping stone to reviewing or rescripting what existence is.
Yeah, that's a lot. But I think the way you summed it up is really, um, regardless of anything, that's really it. That the present, the past, the future are all, they all exist as one. This is it right here. And yeah, we can rescript at any moment. Now, I'm starting to like these movies that I haven't seen because as I hear the explanations, I'm going, okay. Because if I look at this energetically in relation to the collective transformation that's taking place, okay, you've got this energy, this aspect, this part of us that has had this experience on the earth, who's now left the earth,
Mm-hmm.
and there's still ancestors on the earth or descendants, one and the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out if we can go back to this place and recreate what we had, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I look at that and go, those parts of the aspects are still stuck on what was.
Mm.
What is beyond that release or that attachment? And that's a whole other thing. But within the confines of what I described and what you described in the structure, the backdrop of the movie, there's all these other consciousnesses that are developing that are
Mm-hmm.
fine. They're okay too.
Mm.
Now, some people might say, or some souls might say, I've had enough of that. I've been there. I'm past that point, and I'm not even thinking about going back there. All right. But within that whole domain, there's all these other streams of consciousnesses and experiences, parallel alternatives, whatever you want to call it, you know, which is, does it work out or it doesn't work out or this or that or the other thing, and romances and other connections and, you know, births and deaths and, so interesting. It's to me, listening to it overall, that's kind of what I see was like, oh, wait a minute. It's not that, we're leaving Earth. It's not that we're staying on Earth, right? Like this movie is talking about Earth as being something that is, that was, that could be. It's all the same thing. It's us. So, and then the fact that you, now that's the other thing, the fact that you throw in, the movie throws in the tech and the AI and the robots. See, I started to say as I was listening to you, I'm thinking to myself, well, that's in this part of the container, going, the theme of the movie, but does it go forward from there into that unknown territory? Well, it does. The experience of it, it may not be the full experience. It may not be as an in-depth experience. It may not be that, but you get the code, you get the transmission, and you move forward. And that's part of your makeup now. That's part of your composition. So you haven't lost it. So you know, it's a fascinating thing. And again, I feel like, oh my God, I want to get this director or this writer on the show too and pick his brain, because what were you thinking? I mean, there are people that that you've worked with, that I've worked with, uh, in every single aspect of society in our experience. I don't care if it's politics. They may not talk about it. Directors, particularly artistry and creativity oriented things that are not motivated by the materialistic things and the bullshit and all that, subjected to the fuckery and all that. But yeah, it's pretty cool to be able to talk about two movies I've never seen and get so much out of it.
Well, it's sort of like we're in an incubation chamber, aren't we? And you sort of look at the example of the plant that was found germinating on Earth after Earth had supposedly been destroyed. And it's a reminder that in a movie, we're often shown things that are external to ourselves, and in the movie, external to the robots, how people related to Earth before it was destroyed and after, etc. But as you point out, we are Earth, and Earth is, in essence, a time ship, and how we perceive it is essentially parallel to the consciousness we're experiencing within ourselves. So if we're seeing destruction and we're seeing negativity and we're seeing a dystopian world, then that's something that is indicative of what's crumbling within ourselves. And if we look at the whole idea of apocalypse, some people look at that as being destruction, but other people see it as rebirth. And so, in order for the new consciousness or new way of existing to emerge, you have to allow the old to crumble or to dissolve. And how you experience that is very unique to each individual. How long we dwell on what doesn't seem to be working before we focus on the new and the renewal and the rejuvenation and those aspects are up to us as well. And so each film sort of illustrates different amounts of time that are spent dwelling on the past, the present, and future. Most of the time, it's the past and the future as opposed to the present, but it's all guiding us back here. And that's one of the things that really stands out.
Yeah. And I go back to, and it's very rudimentary. It's very, human, 3D. But okay, if I don't care what the issue is, and I'm going to, because I've used it twice, I'll use it again. Um, Whoever we are, whoever you are, whoever I am, we're in the human body. We're still subject to the human condition, as my friend earlier used to say, up to a point, because I think that's the threshold we're crossing. Um, but take any issue, any issue at all. What's one of the hottest issues in America and even the world? Probably is Donald Trump. Now you have this thing they call Trump deranged syndrome, which is actually pretty accurate. But there's another one on the other side that's like Trump deranged syndrome that's pro Trump. Okay. Now here's my point. My point is, you said you look at one thing and you see it as apocalypse, you see it as destruction, and you want to go over to the other side because what? Because it's not that. So now you're attaching all these things to the other side. the Democrats. So if I talk to my, I've got people that I know very closely that absolutely would like to see him dead. And I don't think in those terms. I'm just saying that down, down low. And over here, the other side is just as complicit. It's the same thing.
Mm.
So until we get to the point where we realize the external is the external is the external, it comes down. There's always two pairs or a pair. We integrate, we integrate. Maybe and very likely the last line of separation or illusion or delusion is masculine and feminine, right? But yes, it's all about ourselves. And as long as we're alienating ourselves from one side or the other, as if we don't it doesn't apply to us and our shit doesn't stink, then we're still on the road to nirvana. And that's okay too. But there's something about the level of intelligence that's coming in now that's allowing us to practice it and apply it and actualize it in the moment and not look back. Okay. And that was the thing about that movie, where when you first started talking about it, I was like, okay, so I'm seeing this as a collective consciousness, a collective energy, as in relation to our story here on Earth as we know it. And we leave after the destruction, which in retrospect, we realize we created. And yet, are we still trying to hang on? It's kind of like when people talk about, and I'm not throwing shade on anybody. Yeah, we got to get back to Lemuria. We got to get back to Atlantis. Well, we fucked that shit up. Okay. So, yeah, there's great points that came with it, but there's also those dark shadows that came with it, the ghost. And that's the whole point. Bring all of it with us and let's step into the next space, the unknown together. So that movie was to me almost like clinging on to the old.
Mm.
And again, there's many, many stories and sub stories and narratives, within and consciousnesses and timelines within that part of the container. But there was another part of the container. And that is, what about those that went forward, that went on and expanded? Is one better than the other? Not necessarily. But how long is it going to take to look at something in a million different ways and realize it's the same thing?
Mm.
That's cognitive dissonance, if you ask me. And I say that to myself first because I've done it. I've made excuses and I've tried to substantiate and rationalize everything from the government to history to relationships to people to everything until finally it comes down. Wait, I'm the one that makes the decision here. I can choose from my imagination. And if I feel like I can grow, you know, big ears like Peter Pan in a green suit and start flying through the air, then I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? I mean,
All the power to you, Todd.
but what's the alternative? My soul has told me since 2011, whatever you do, don't do the same thing you've done before.
Mhm.
So there's such value in, you know, taking into consideration whoever wrote that, whoever wrote those, that movie and the one before. There's a lot to be said for individual expression and the collective meaning that can be found in the dots that can be connected by immersing yourself in somebody's channel.
Mm.
That's what that movie is. That's what that book is, or whatever originated it.
Mm.
Incredible.
I love the analogy of the channel because everything is on some level of frequency. It's a vibration. It's inviting us to experience different bandwidths of reality. And the next one that we'll jump into today is another Tim Burton film, Miss Peregrine. Are you familiar with Miss Peregrine's Home for Unusual Children, or no, Peculiar Children, excuse me. That's the title. 2016.
No, no. I thought if it would have been like in the early 2000s, maybe, but I remember the title, and
Mhm.
I did not see that movie, but I respect his work.
He's really, I find he's a creative genius. I love how he brings life to books and stories on screen. He brought this one to life, one of the books of Ransom Riggs, who's the author of a series. This is the first in a series of books. Uh, and Eva Green is in it. She's a French actress. You might be familiar with Emma Bloom. There might be other people that are familiar to you, but essentially it reminds me a bit of the X-Men series that some people are familiar with. There are a number of children. I guess if you think about Stranger Things, the very hot Netflix series that is in season 5 at the moment or recently released, it's similar themes essentially. There are these children who have unusual abilities, and somehow they've all ended up at this home, and this woman is aiming to protect them. And what's interesting is she is a bird woman, among other things. So she has her own transmutation abilities. She works with, she's an alchemist. She turns back time on a regular basis as an effort, again, to protect the children from different things. But each of the children in the story has a different ability. There's some that are invisible. There's one who floats up off the earth if she doesn't wear lead boots. There are ones that see different things. One sees demons that are after them. And they all have lessons to teach each other. But in order to do that, they have to move through their own process of self-honesty or transparency and be willing to share and authentically who they are. And although Miss Peregrine is able to see into these children, she knows what they are. They don't always know themselves, and they don't always feel comfortable in their own skin. And everyone, one way or another, can relate to that, because we all go through periods where we are working to accept who we are, to decode who we are, our purpose, sole purpose, why we're here, what we're doing. So although each of the individual characters is on a unique trajectory, they're also on an interconnected trajectory, much like humanity. Again, so in terms of expansion of consciousness, there are a lot of connections that can be seen or made. And really, it's only, excuse me, in working together that these characters are able to overcome their obstacles.
I saw this movie.
Did you? What do you remember about it?
It was a great movie.
Mm.
And I think there was a central character. It was a boy, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Jake.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, and then there was, yeah, I remember this movie. It reminds me of another movie, and I'll try to remember what that movie is. Because even though it's not dealing with the paranormal or the psychic or that type of thing, it was the same type of thing. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, it was Michael Caine was like a schoolmaster
Mhm.
in a remote children's home for orphans. And he was kind of magical. And a boy came. He was orphaned. I think it was Ethan Hawke. Okay. And or Toby Maguire, one of those two. Toby Maguire. So he comes through the ranks. He leaves and goes and has a normal life. And Michael Caine is a doctor who's never been certified. And
Figures.
Toby Maguire becomes but he's a real doctor. Like they know their shit, right? And
Mhm.
Toby Maguire goes out in the world, comes back because Michael Caine dies and takes over as the new Michael Caine. Right. And it's very, very, very touching, very profound from an energetic basis. Now, going back to this movie you're talking about, this woman that ran the place was like Michael Caine. Jake was like Toby Maguire character. And there was all this and another movie that I would say is similar in a eclectic ways, One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest.
Mm.
Okay. Because there was this thing that you described, which basically was the individualization frequency or quotient coming to the surface, where everybody was invited to be themselves. And by virtue of that, there was this collective network web that operated at a highest efficiency, which is what
Yes,
happened in the movie with Tim Burton, which is what happened to a degree in the one I'm talking about with Michael, what's his face, Caine, and even Cuckoo's Nest, because
Michael
because
Caine movie. I think that was the Cider House Rules,
that's
1991.
what it is. Yeah, Cider House Rules.
Yep.
That's exactly what it was. But if you look at Cuckoo's Nest, because if you look at each one of them, you take the linear out of it, right? And you just look for those moments where there was that, where everybody was themselves,
Hmm.
and therefore the collective operated above. You might say we started with Lucy in the Matrix, and Valerian above the Matrix. And so, even if it's for a moment, even if it's in that moment when they took all the crazies from the mental institution, they took them out into the town, and he told that guy, "Oh, this is Professor so and so, and this is Doctor so and so." Even if it's
Yep.
for that moment, I mean, how do we know or not know that we haven't come here for moments that are this big? Instead of trying to analyze and conceptualize and validate our existence by the longevity of a certain, if anything's been taught to me this year, especially in the last few weeks, is to honor the present energies. It doesn't mean anything about tomorrow, although you're probably doing all right. If you've got everything's, clicking. It soothes yesterday, the past. It also brings in wisdom from the past. It's just a space. It's like and when you have other people there with you, which is really the point, in mass, then you have this culture of consciousness that is unfuckwithable, basically. You know what I mean? It is, but it's based and reliant and you know on the individual being themselves, and that's not an easy thing to do with the road that we've all ridden. However, it's becoming vogue. It's becoming something that's more natural. It's becoming obvious that, yeah, this is, but how do we do it? Nobody's got the answer, but just to stick your head out there and do it. Because the one that's telling me how to do it is the one I'm not going to listen to anymore, because the whole world's been telling us how to do it. The only way to do it is to be yourself. And the only way you can do that is to go into yourself. And there's something about a communal connectivity in these three examples, where you have, Cuckoo's Nest, and you have the Cider House, and where, yeah, it becomes a mutual equilibrium of personal and collective growth that's simultaneous.
Yep. That's exactly right. And what I find quite noteworthy as well is that in each of those cases, you're sort of being told that the story is depicted as kind of a fantastical parallel reality. This isn't reality. This only happens over here. And what we're in the process of doing is merging with what we are taught is supposed to be a fantastical reality. In fact, that is reality where we're at, where we're meant to be. And yet, so long as we see that as external to ourselves, as someone else's story, then we're not allowing ourselves to experience that directly. So these kinds of movies are pointers to those aha moments, like the aha moments in both the Cider House Rules and Miss Peregrine, where those characters are working in an interconnected way, being authentic, and they're able to help each other either escape from a demon or overcome whatever obstacle it happens to present, only because they are being themselves. And so that is a huge message for everyone, regardless of what situation they're in. It is all about finding the inner courage to be honest with yourself and do what feels right, do what comes naturally, rediscover what that is. Even if you feel on some level as an outcast or weird or different, that kind of a label is a label you've adopted. And as we move through those adopted labels and discard them, that's when true authenticity can blossom. And that's when we no longer see these stories about unusual people as being on the fringes. We start to see that as what's going on within us, what's blossoming through us. And that's when we merge with the evolution of consciousness and why we're here.
Yes, yes. And yeah, to your point too, and where we're at now, my friend Ty, my brother Ty from Sedona, he says, you know it's a real download when you know it's a real download because it's immediately shareable.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that doesn't mean like, I get a download and I'm gonna hold on to it for a while because I need to figure it out or whatever, and maybe I share it 2 years later. It's not a linear statement. But there is something to pulling something in and sharing it immediately, be it whatever kind of channel or light language or art or whatever the case is. Now, there's a couple of scenes in the no, in the Tim Burton one. I can't pronounce her
Mm-hmm.
name, Mrs.
Peregrine.
Pettigrew. Okay. There's a couple of scenes in there, and I can't remember the particulars, but I remember the way it came through. And it's right to what we're speaking. It's right to what I just said about having a download where it's immediately shareable. In other words, it becomes something that everybody can see.
Mm.
And in these two scenes, there are a couple of scenes where one of these kids, and they were all, like self-conscious and thought they were weird, they were all in that boat where another kid was able to say, hey, wait a minute, you don't understand who they are. This is who they are, or it's okay. You can go ahead and let go with me. I think both of the scenes were two people, and it was someone just allowing the space to open up. Well, I think that's what we've come to here. We've come to a space where we're actually speaking our truth beyond just our own internal dialogue. And as powerful as that has
Mm.
been to bring us back to the point of what we know that we are, and then go, oh, but I'm also in this human body now. What's the point? Because who am I and what's the point is something that, comes up every day. And if it doesn't, you'll get there. So, but now it becomes, okay, yes, okay, I am the I am. And now what? We share something like this, or you open up to someone else, or it's a space, and it's not an easy thing. It's new territory. It's vulnerability. And if you look at Cuckoo's Nest, and if you look at the Cider House, and the one you're talking about, oh yeah,
Miss
there's
Peregrine.
nothing but vulnerability, and ultimately leading to transparency.
Yeah.
Okay. If you look at those characters, if you look at the flow of the movie, you have one movie where the big Indian breaks the window out and goes out into infinity. You have another
Mm-hmm.
movie where Tobey Maguire comes back, and the thing in the movie was to tell a story every night. And he would say the same thing every night as he was going out the door. Michael Caine would say some kind of poetic statement by Rudyard Kipling or something like that. And so that's how that movie ended. And then the other, right? So my point is, it all looks different, but what we were seeing was this transformation, this evolution, this creation and collaboration of two or more in physical form with all the drama, all the BS. And I love the fact that all of these three movies accentuate the weirdos, which really aren't the weirdos, because that's part of the whole journey is we're all the same and we're all fucking weirdos, every single one of us. Okay. You know what I mean? And so there's something to it. And I feel like that's what is occurring for us. It's not that easy. It's getting easier as we lose the judgment and the expectations, and we can have conversations, be they in a public format or a private format with those closest to you, whatever the case is. But yeah, this is a powerful thing, and it strikes me both ironic and paradoxical. But it makes total sense that it comes down to the human being stepping through, you know. I mean, all the other aspects that we haven't done that part. We're doing it. We haven't done it, but we're doing it, but we're being offered opportunities to do it to a greater and greater degree, which is serving universal, having universal implications all the way around. See, string theory, as you talked about. Thanks.
Mm. I just love how each of the movies we've introduced and explored a bit today has followed this theme of increasing self-acceptance and acceptance. Because really, when it comes to integrating our multidimensional being, expanding consciousness into more of who we are, this is fundamental. It's necessary, and it's really the only path. And so when we looked at Valerian, we reflected on sort of expanding more of the soul and the spiritual side and the ethics that we work through every day in all of the situations that present in order to see more of who we are. And then with Wall-E, again, we're sort of invited to reflect on every moment is an opportunity to create a new earth, a new reality, to feel reborn, whatever that means for us. And Miss Peregrine and the Cider House Rules and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest are each drawing attention to our own self-judgment, our own self-criticism about being something other than what is normal and natural, because ultimately we all go through this process of coming to rediscover what authenticity is and what self-acceptance is, first through the opposite. And we often experience a whole range of things. And that's part of the beauty of being human. That's part of the gift we give ourselves. So I really appreciate that we have had some time to explore these things today. And as usual, I'm very grateful to our listeners and viewers for sharing their suggestions. I marvel at the synchronicity of how things flow together and just the flow of our conversation, Todd, because the themes that come up are universal, they're relevant to the expansion of consciousness. And even when we reflect on movies that have existed for a long time, we can tune into frequencies, bandwidths, or vibrations that offer information that's always available to us. And it's only as we blossom into more of ourselves that we access messages we continue to give ourselves, and we're ready to decode them and embody more of it, put it into practice.
Yeah. 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 And I love the fact that even though the first one is a robot AI, there's aspects of that to it. There's a very, very human aspect to all of it. Like, that storyline from Walleye and the others, right? And I think what I've come to anyway in my own right is there's nothing in the human experience to be thrown away.
Exactly.
Not one fucking thing. I don't care how hard it hurts. Okay. So we meet in the middle and we have licked our wounds together. And this is where the leap is. So a lot of the things that we've come across, we say, well, that's no, that's I don't want to look at that. I don't want to look at that. I don't want to look at that. When we go through things, the support we gave each other in the old paradigm was based on victimization, victim consciousness. It was feeding the fire and perpetuating the old. So we might say, oh, well, I've got to do it all myself. And we know ultimately that's what happens. But well, my point is this: there is an element of human soul support that serves us. And it's not like where we've come from. It's a place to encourage. And that's what I look at in these movies. It was one encouraging the other to be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Be yourself. And if that means you went through something or I went through something that was very much of a, grief oriented or a death or whatever, be yourself might be let it out. Be here in this space and let it out. I'll bear witness. Or it might be go, get drunk and throw ice water all over yourself and run outside and dance naked or whatever the case is, right? But I see that in these movies and I see that in the field of our potential now. All of us is to no longer, as hard as it it can be, and the universe will work with us more and more and more, and has. But it's really it's again an all or nothing proposition. It's a leap. We can still support each other, but in the development and the encouragement and the excitement of being who we are, to be in a space with someone else and you can absolutely be who you are. I mean, we're just finding that with ourselves. So
Mm.
this is a very synchronistic uh, few movies, and yeah, let's see what happens next week.
I love it. Thanks everyone for being with us, for sharing your feedback. As usual, we welcome it, so send it along, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon.
All right, happy 12/13 in the Southern Hemisphere.